Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chris and today I'll be working on this Viperine Gorgon doll. She is secondhand. She's in pretty decent condition except for her hair. I began by cutting off all of her hair as close to the scalp as possible with a sharp pair of scissors. I also removed the pink snakes from the back of her head. We won't be using those for this project. And I pulled her head off and removed all the stubble from inside, but as you can see there's a slash in the back of her head. I used that to pull those plugs out. I used my 100% acetone to take off the factory paint from her face and her scalp. She'll be getting different color hair. Once her original face is gone, I wash her face and her body with soap and water and then let her dry. Before doing the reroute today, I'll be using 100% acrylic yarn for this, and the color is black, dark green, and a kind of a acid green, maybe Granny Smith apple. I don't know what color to call it. I carefully pull the yarn into its constituent parts, and then I go ahead with some India ink and do a color block on her head just so I can get some placement marks. These Bombay inks are quite good for dyeing the plastic or the vinyl of the doll's head. And right here you'll see that I'm using yellow and green to make that acid green color for the very back of her head. The middle will get the dark green, and then the top of her head will be black. And I just paint it on with a regular paintbrush. Later on, after I've done the reroute, I will actually sew up the slash in the back of her head. But I do that off camera. Here you'll see I use my makeshift reroute tool. It's an X-Acto handle with a needle that's had its eye cut at a slant. I loop the yarn piece over my two fingers, insert the eye of the needle, and then stab the back of her head. I repeat this hundreds of times until her head is fully rerouted. I do skip some plugs, just simply because yarn hair takes up a lot more volume than regular doll hair. Here she is completely rerouted. And I'm going to use that slash in the back of her head to my advantage to help add the glue to the plug so that her hair does not get pulled out in the next part of the process. Here's the Fabri-Tac glue. It works quite well for this job and seems to be heat resistant. I use a hairdryer to reattach her head to the body later on. So I pour in quite a bit of glue, then use a toothpick to smush it all around on the inside of her head, covering as much as possible every plug inside. The thought for this doll was to turn her into a character that would fit in the Harry Potter universe. Here her head is all dry. The hole is still open because at this point I will be brushing out all that yarn hair and tugging pretty hard on that, and I thought that would break the stitches if I stitched it too early, so I brush her out, and once it's completely brushed out, I use my very small straight iron to iron her hair. This character is the Slytherin version. I wanted her to be somewhere between 15 and 17 years old, having enough magic to do experimental magic on herself, making her go from a normal looking human witch into something with snake-like attributes, the scales, the slit eyes, or slit pupil eyes, and so on. Here's her hair all nice and, or half of her hair all nice and smooth, and the other side still fluffy, and now it's all smooth. And I'll give her a quick brush or comb with my comb here to make sure I've got everything smooth, and then I will wrap her head up in a piece of cloth and then get my two-part epoxy sculpt to fill in that bit of gap that was left by the snakes earlier. So I just take a piece of each, mix it really well, and then kind of squeeze it into the gap. This girl, I wanted her to be a pureblood, so just like any good Slytherin would be, and I wanted her to kind of have that snaky sort of aspects to her. So once I get the epoxy completely mixed, I push it into her head and then use my fingertips and a little bit of water, which I do off camera to smooth it out. You can just see a little bit here. It's a very long and tedious sort of process. Epoxy sculpt, when it's mixed, is a very sticky stuff, and I do struggle with it a bit here, and I just cut all that out. You don't need to watch 15 minutes of me trying to get that stuff to stay where I wanted it. Once it's 100% dry, I take a little emery board and file it down so it's nice and smooth. Then I get rid of the dust and then paint it with some acrylic paint to try to color match it, which, by the way, I failed at completely. Oh, I missed a step. I do add a bit of super glue to the outside to try to keep it from breaking off later. Apply the super glue and then brush it on with this kid's paintbrush, just to make sure it's all covered and attached to the vinyl of the head. That actually worked pretty well. When I reattached her head, the epoxy sculpt did not come off, so I'm pretty happy with that result. Here I am trying to color match it. This color I have here is nowhere near close, but it works well enough as a base color. And then I will use my pan pastels to color it a little bit further, hide it just a little bit better. And here I am getting ready to do her face up. I have at this point sprayed her face a couple of times with Mr. Super Clear, allowing it to dry 30 minutes between each coat. And now I use my Derwent watercolor pencil, then my pan pastels to give her face. I begin by sketching out her features with a medium shade of brown, something that will be easily covered up later with, appropriate colors, black or white or blues and greens. I know I'm off camera here just a little bit. I'm trying to give her eyes that are not matching. I want one to be slightly more open and her looking off to the side in an aloof, disdainful even expression. The best way I can call it is resting bitch face. I hope I'm allowed to say that on YouTube. I sketch in her eyebrows just very lightly. I want the one to be arched a bit more than the other. And I want the one that's her eye mostly closed to be kind of not nearly so high up, still a bit arched. Once I'm completely happy with my sketch, I go in with my Pit Pastel white pastel pencil to fill in the whites of her eyes. I'm sorry, I'm still sketching here. I know it's hard to see. I keep going off camera. I've done one eye with that Pit Pastel white pastel pencil, and as you can see, the color payoff is pretty decent with this. I'm doing the second eye at this point. Redo the sketch of her pupils and irises. And then I begin with the colors. I want her eyes to be a vivid blue-green color with acid green pupils, like a particular viper. I'll have to look that up. I don't remember. I'll leave it in the description box if I find it. I use my red pan pastel to give her a classic red lip. And then I go in with this Kingfisher blue to fill in her pupils. Or I'm sorry, her irises, not her pupils. Her pupils are green. To fill in her irises. And just start the first layer. And at this point, I've given her another layer of Mr. Super Clear. I am going over all my lines with that same medium shade of brown. Just to start filling in some small details, eyebrow hairs and so on. Redo my sketch. Mr. Super Clear tends to wash out this particular shade of brown. So I don't lose it, I just go over it again in this layer. Just darkening up a little bit of each of the details. Her eyelids, her pupils, her irises, her eyebrows, even her nostrils at this point. I want them to be ever so slightly flared, as if she smells something bad, like maybe a mudblood. Then I use this nice dark crimson color to outline her lips, give it a nice defined shape. And once again, I really want her lips to be that classic red lip color. Off screen, I'm referencing a picture of a classic, what I would call bitch face, excuse the word, just to kind of give her that aloof, I'm better than you because I'm pureblood look. So here he is after maybe 2 more layers of color in Mr. Super Clear, and I'm ready to add in all the tiny details, lip lines, the eyelashes or bottom eyelashes, her eyeliner, her winged eyeliner now in black, and just all those details, just going over everything, making sure it's as saturated as I want it to be. Giving her that final touches. And once again, I went ahead and with her backstory, I wanted her to just be that stereotypical pure blood, can't stand mudbloods or half-bloods sort of Slytherin girl. I am putting on her bottom eyeliner there. And then her eyelashes, bottom eyelashes, I use very tiny strokes, making one vertical line and then 2 slanted lines to form a sort of triangle shape for each eyelash. That gives her a fluffy eyelashes without it being overwhelming on her face. And the final highlights here and there, around the inner corner of her eyes, middle of her forehead, highlighting her eyebrows, all those last minute highlights that she needs just to make her look complete. I do end up darkening the very tip of each eyebrow with black to try to match it a little better with her hair. I didn't want to do a green black ombre or gradient in her eyebrows. I wanted those to be a little bit less noticeable and her hair a little bit more noticeable, if that makes any sense. Here's the highlights of her eyebrows, highlighting each of those little eyebrow hairs. And once again, going over all of those whites of her eyes with that pit pastel, white pastel. chalk pencil. Here's the inner corner highlights. I do brush those out later with a fluffy brush. And there's her face up done. Not done, but last one more time sprayed, and then going over all of the blacks because they kind of fade out a little bit with Mr. Super Clear. Giving her the shading at this point too on her eyes to make her eyebrows look, or her eyes look more rounded. You'll notice off to the side there, my ring light is starting to fall into the camera view there. Sorry about that. I bumped it and I didn't want to stop recording. And of course, as all of my dolls do, she gets a beauty mark this time right there on her lower left, on her left cheek. There's actually a little bit of dust, shh, don't tell, that I was covering up with that beauty mark this time. I give her last highlights in the middle of her forehead, then the highlights in her eyes, and just my normal, I guess signature might be a better word. Dots, one big dot on the upper part of the eye, and then a little line on the lower, on the opposite corner. Last minute little shading, or contouring and blushing. Then her body is ready to be blushed. Well, I do add a couple of layers of Mr. Super Clear to her face to make sure that the paint is, or her face is protected. I use the same colors I contoured her face with to contour her body, giving extra attention to the, I guess you could call them snake scales of her under her arms, her stomach area, and then basically any part of a snake that would be touching the ground as it slithers. That's where I really wanted to make sure I emphasized those parts. Any joints, palms of their hand, and so on. I gave her several layers of Mr. Super Clear there as well. And now we can see how her hair looks with her new face and body. Remove that wrap I have on her hair that was protecting it from Mr. Super Clear and all the pastels and watercolors. Then I reused my hairdryer to reunite her head to her body. Give her hair a nice brushing out. After being wrapped up for so long, it really needed it. And this is a good tip. Use your hairdryer to warm up the head just a little bit, warm up the vinyl, and it slips right back onto the neck peg without cracking the face up. Right here I took a very big chance because I wasn't holding her head in the right place. But in the end I got it back on. I gave her some piercings in her ears, which you really can't see too well there. And then gave her a haircut off camera and realized that I am most definitely not a hairstylist. But I like how shaggy and crazy it looks a little bit there. Kind of edgy. I made her a pair of pants, a button-down collared shirt, a little cardigan in gray rather than black because I figured she's Slytherin. Gray is a good color. A little tie out of a ribbon, her cloak or robes, and then repainted a pair of Monster High boots. Made her a wand and got her dressed. I did that off camera because that takes like about 10 minutes or so, and you don't want to watch that. Put her hands on and give her her wand, and she is ready to go. Thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate that. Make sure you subscribe, give me a thumbs up if you like the video, share it if you want, and I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Bye.